closer, my child.
Well, hello, family. Back with another podcast. This time I was on the Remnant Warriors podcast, and we talk a little bit about everything. We talk about ancient angels, Nephilim, giant stuff, old world to Taria. We talk about the little season and Gunnar Heinsohn. Yeah, this is a fun one. I think you guys will enjoy it. And if you do enjoy it, please give me a 5-star review if you're listening on Apple or Spotify. And if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, please hit the subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. God bless and enjoy.
All right, welcome everyone to another show, Remnant Warriors Podcast. We got episode 24 here, and we have a special guest today, JT, also known as JT Follows JC. You can check him out on all the social medias that you can see in his link tree down at the bottom of this description. But before we get into our show here, let's get down to business. If you're new to the show or returning, we appreciate you being here. Remember to hit that subscribe button, like the show, and share it with your friends. We like to get into a bunch of different topics of discussion. We like to talk about Nephilim, giants, fallen angels. We get into a bunch of different theological perspectives of the Bible, and we love to have brothers in Christ or sisters and have them on the show and get their perspective of things. Tonight, we have on JT. And a little bit about JT. I came across his content, I would say about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I'm not very good with my time scale. But he had created a Hoover Dam video breaking down the Freemasonic symbolism, fallen angel symbolism between the monuments that were held on top of the Hoover Dam. It's sad that I don't think that they're there anymore, but you can check him out on YouTube. You could also check him out on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. He's got a podcast called Decoding Babylon. It's an awesome show. Check that out. You could also check out his documentary. It's called Ancient Angels. I believe that is on Vimeo. I think I remember watching that a few years ago or a year ago or so. But awesome stuff, brother. Good to have you on the show. Welcome. And how are you?
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. I'm doing well.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So we kind of like to open the show and give the guests a little breakdown of your testimony, what led you to Christ, and the journey that you've been on since then and to where you're at now.
Yeah, well, I was raised in a Christian home. I went to Christian schools, and so I learned what it was to be a Christian a long time ago. But I mean, mostly in the way, maybe more the way it looks versus the way it's supposed to feel. And it wasn't until later in life that, I kind of had some rocky times, and kind of all culminated with the year 2020 and 2021 and all the things that happened. And I started to get disillusioned with lots of things. And it was like an anxious time in my life, like it was for lots of people. And during that time, I really had to get on my knees, and because I was so anxious about everything, personal life issues, and then the election, the pandemic, just all the uncertainty. And I was really seeking God for real because I needed something, and God changed me. And during that time, I decided everything was basically a lie that I've been told, and nothing was as it seemed. And so as I was reading my Bible again, I started to notice things that popped out to me, like how did I ever miss certain things, and it felt like God was really speaking to me. And during that time, also, I was researching if they're lying about this, what's true, and just going down the kind of rabbit hole. I was all into watching YouTube and videos about symbolism and reading stuff about that, and I couldn't really get enough of that. And as soon as that, God led me on that journey to eventually, like, hey, my brother said, you should check out TikTok. It's got some interesting stuff on here. And I was kind of surprised about that because I thought I just heard it was for little girls and stuff like that. But eventually I'm like, well, there's some really interesting conspiracy stuff about like the Illuminati and all the weird conspiracies. And so at one point, I had started making little videos about my almost like little testimonials about like, hey, I read this in the Bible a long time ago, but I really never knew what it meant. But here's how I've applied it to my life recently. So I made all these little videos where I was driving in my car just talking. And this is back before I was definitely not trying to go viral. I felt like God wanted me to speak more openly about my faith than I had. And then so eventually it got to the point where I saw something very weird. Obviously, they connected with like the conspiratorial and also a biblical um, topic, and I said, I can't just talk about this, and because I knew TikTok was like a visual app, so I needed to show people, and I made this kind of little skit, and I went from like 3 followers to like 1,000 followers after that video. It was like 10,000 views or something, and then my brother's like, "Oh, you should make a series of videos like that," and then I did, and for like I had this platform, over on TikTok, and that led to Instagram, and then eventually YouTube, and making a podcast, and eventually making a movie with my buddy about angels and things like that.
Awesome. Awesome, man. Yeah, and what we've been kind of doing lately with our shows, we've been connecting and marketing with a bunch of different people within our community, I'd say, especially in YouTube, TikTok realm, and things like that. And I do think that it's important for all of us to kind of share the content, and get that message out there. Because I do think a lot of ways that God's working right now is he's moving through us, and he's moving to grow the kingdom, and he's moving to save souls, but he's he gets people in different ways, I think.
For
There's
sure.
people that can relate to your videos a little bit better. There's people that can relate to other people's a little bit better. But it's so funny how I'm seeing God work, and he's bringing the conspiracies to the Bible when it was
Hmm.
opposite for me. It was the Bible brought conspiracy. I went from the Bible to conspiracies. So
Yeah,
I
that's
went
how
the,
same
the
me
the reverse
same.
route. But no, that's awesome. You are doing an awesome job with your content, and along with your colleagues as well. So let's get into talking about your documentary, Ancient Angels, and tell us a little bit about it and where we can find it.
Yeah, well, so first of all, you can find it on Vimeo, and like you could probably tell by the title, Ancient Angels, it's a spin-off Ancient Aliens. And so before I was really got too conspiratorial, I used to like to watch that show. And as a guy who is born and raised a Christian, I never believed in aliens, but I found the show really interesting, and not so much their dumb theories, but more like, hey, these megalithic sites that are all over the whole world. And I've just thought that was fascinating because I really had not heard of hardly any of them. I think most people have heard of like the Giza Plateau and the three major pyramids that are there. But when they go from site to site and they start showing more of the world, and yeah, you have pyramids on basically every continent people are on, and maybe even the ones they're not on. But that it was just really interesting, and I did have to kind of struggle with that. It's like, well, I don't believe aliens did it, but I know that what the history they're telling us is can't be true. There's no way that they cut stones that are harder than the tools they had. It just doesn't. That makes no sense to me. And I never really understood the scale and the scope of these things. So I thought, well, that's really kind of troubling as a Christian, because then you go research people like Graham Hancock and the people like Rogan has on his channel that also talk about this, and they talk about lost civilizations, and they talk about timelines that obviously are not biblical at all, like the go way past the genealogies in the Bible. So like I didn't know that they were wrong. I just was like kind of, because I was just struggling with that. But then when started to wake up, I again was reading my Bible again, and I stumbled across Genesis 6, which it's right at the beginning of the Bible, tells the story of the flood, and it mentions how the sons of God took wives of the daughters of men, and they bore children through the Nephilim. Some translations say giants. And then I started to say, you know what, that's interesting. And then I've read the book of Enoch, and I was like, okay, wait a minute, this actually kind of makes sense with this worldview. That what if those big megaliths that we can't really explain, what if those things happened in the days of Noah, and then the gods that the people were talking about, they weren't talking about aliens. They called them gods from the heavens, and they mentioned giants. So what if those beings were the sons of God? What if they were the watchers from the book of Enoch? Because the watchers from the book of Enoch gave men knowledge of things, metalworking, stone cutting, the beautifying of eyelids, sorcery, magic, everything, astronomy. And I was like, okay, this actually makes sense that how the ancients would have had advanced knowledge of things. And so, yeah, so the movie basically is about that. It's about a biblical worldview that can explain the megaliths. It can explain lots of things, and then it gets obviously into the origin of demons and talks about giants and all that, all the things that it's an argument against the ancient astronaut theorists, which I believe is a bunch of garbage.
No, right. I think there's a battle of two narratives going on here. I think there's the Genesis 6 conspiracy versus like the Anunnaki narrative or something going on here.
Yes, correct. I would say that that's the funny part about it is like I would say that the Anunnaki story is a story that actually fits with Genesis 6.
Right.
I think that like some people would say like a Billy Carson who just got called out. Obviously, I'm sure you guys probably heard that story where he got exposed for being a fraud.
Yeah.
But so some people would say, oh, the Bible is copying these ancient Sumerian stories where it's like there's one true story, right? And then you can have different perspectives on it. I think the interesting part is like Billy Carson would quote like something like Zachariah Sitchin, who misquoted or mistranslated these tablets. And so they go, it's like a game of telephone between all these people who have this new agey view, or they want to believe in aliens. It's the Bible has the true account. And I think that's obviously how I interpret like all the conspiracies. I would say the Bible is what I know is true. And then I try to basically, well, this could be true because the Bible leaves room for this, or this could not be true. But yeah, like obviously the story of the Anunnaki seems very clearly like here's the story of the fallen. This is the story of the Watchers. And so they're given more credit than they deserve. But of course, if these ancient peoples worship them like gods, of course they would give them more credit. This is like where I believe this is where like the pantheon of gods came from, is that, yeah, these different Anunnaki, which again, and then they created they were experimenting with human genetics. Well, that sounds like the days of Noah when all flesh was corrupted. So once again, it's the same story, but of course, people who want to deny Jesus, they will, and then they'll think of an alternative view, like where, oh, well, these things were just ascended masters. We could be like them. We could evolve to be like them, and things like that.
Right. It's so obvious to me, this whole cosmic chess match of a game that we're seeing. And it's probably because I do have the Holy Spirit dwelling within me and I can discern through that lens. But the biggest thing that I see is that you have the opposing narrative. I'll say Satan's narrative, Satan's agenda is he wants to be God. He wants to take the credit of everything that God's done. And then you've got the biblical narrative where it's like, no, like this is the truth. This is the true God. Look what he did to Abraham. He took Abraham out of Mesopotamia. He took him out of that way of religion that where Abraham's ancient Abraham's relatives were ancient Sumerians, and so what they believed in was this whole understanding of ancient angels, or these fallen angels, these gods of old, the Elohim. And there's such a tension between both communities right now that I feel like it's just back and forth fighting constantly. And that's kind of like you brought up the Billy Carson thing, and we saw it for ourselves in plain view, where Carson he's got 10 million followers, and he's been propelling this message that's alternative to the biblical message. And now God's come in and he's exposed him, and we'll see where it goes from there. But yeah, man. So what do you think the days of Noah were like? If you could kind of just give like an understanding. So we have gene modifying going on, possibly. We've got Nephilim roaming around. With these great monolithic structures around the world, what do you think they were used for, and what what's the deal with those things?
Well, I would believe that obviously I would go right to the biblical account where I would say it was a wicked time. But I do believe that, what you would probably be taught on Sunday school would not do it justice, because I think it wasn't, people weren't not wearing just animal skins and very primitive. I think it was an advanced time. I think that they were obviously, anybody could build structures like that, was advanced in all kinds of ways. Maybe not in the ways we are, because maybe we have like a more technological thing. I believe that they likely had something else, because all the technology we have, we don't do things like that. So it's kind of like that. Just, you think the cranes and electronics and things like that, we still would struggle to move million-pound stones, and or why would we? It seems too difficult. So they must have had something else. So I think that, I remember my buddy. I became friends when I was first on TikTok. I became friends with this guy named Luke Caverns, and he's got a YouTube channel, and he does archaeology stuff. He fancies himself a little bit like Indiana Jones, but I remember he had a good. We had a podcast, and at one point he was like, "Okay, so just think about, like, from God's perspective, if it was this really primitive time like they show you, would he need to use a flood to destroy the whole earth in order to wipe out like little pockets of hunter gatherers, or if it was more like today, or maybe even more advanced, that in order to wipe out this wicked civilization, he needed something that would wipe it away, because otherwise he could just send lightning to light their grass huts on fire. But they didn't have grass huts; they had pyramids, they had all kinds of things, and yeah, I think that what it says in Genesis 6 is, it says that all flesh was corrupted. So it wasn't just that people were bad; they were that, but they were corrupted. And then you go to the Enoch account, that the fallen created Nephilim, and the Nephilim were these giants. And it was like over time, I believe, that the Nephilim, they got even more corrupt, and they became cannibalistic, and they literally ate people. So it was a horrible time. And obviously that makes sense now, that when it says that Noah was pure in his generations, that's why he saved him. He was righteous too. And I think if he wasn't righteous, I don't know if it would have mattered, but he was righteous and he was pure in his generation. So that does not mean he was perfect. It just means he had a clean DNA back to the first man, Adam. So therefore, right, the original prophecy in the Bible could be fulfilled through him, that Eve's seed would eventually crush the head of the serpent. And so, like, if that might have been the devil's plan back in the day, or the fallen's plan, that they were going to try to corrupt that seed line, and then therefore that prophecy could not come true, because it would have been one of their seed. But obviously God knew better.
Right. Right. I think there's a lot of sacrificial rituals going on. I think because, God tells us that the life is in the blood. I think there was something to do with these megalithic structures and sacrifice, and, because what the devil does is he counterfeits things that God has already created. And so, God had, uh, he's always had the intentions and the platform of sacrifice, right? Like we've seen that
Mm-hmm.
in the Bible. And so I'm thinking too that these the people that didn't worship Yahweh, the God, the true God, that they were worshiping these other Elohim, and so they were doing these other sacrificial rituals where not only we see the same tendencies with the god of Baal or Baal and things like that, but I think it's like you were saying, they were kind of eating each other. It's wild to really understand and think, but I think they were somehow getting some sort of spiritual energy from it. I don't know if they were.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Well,
it
so I
can
didn't
be
answer your
speculative.
question. So what were the pyramids and things? What were they for? I think that maybe before those days, I don't know that they were just for sacrifices. I think that they might have been for energy. I think they might have had something to do with powering these places. Because it is interesting to think, like the Great Pyramid. It's a very dense structure, and it's like, obviously, I think they say, like, granite, in the way it's put together, it could almost be used like a giant battery or something like that. I've heard those kind of theories, because it actually just has like the king's chamber, which, again, there was no king in there. There's no throne or anything like that. Was just some kind of weird box. And then there was like these shafts that kind of go up, and they're kind of almost pointed at these different constellations or stars. Now, so I think that theory is pretty interesting. I think that when you make something in the way that it is, I think that maybe, like, obviously the Giza Plateau lines up with Orion's belt. There's something about the stars and these things. Some people have theorized that a pyramid's a man-made mountain. Maybe these Nephilim kings would have associated themselves with these stars, and then they would build their own mountain to be a god because they were related to gods.
Right.
I think that maybe, I mean, like I said, I'm just speculating here, but I think that I think specifically the sacrifices came afterwards, like after the flood, because here's my thought process on that. Because like people like the Aztecs, they sacrifice on these pyramids. Well, who built the pyramids? Well, according to the Aztecs, giants built the pyramids. Okay, so what happened in the book of Enoch when the giants died? There was no place for them. They were not intended to be. So God basically said, "You guys will roam the earth as unclean spirits." So if they're trying to get knowledge from whoever created those things, they could contact the ancestors, through this. And so obviously, if those giants, as described in Enoch, they're so depraved, well, how do you contact them? Through blood, through sacrifice. Right. So they're literally trying to, it goes back all the way to like the serpent in the garden. They're trying to get knowledge from these beings. And they worship them as gods. So again, they might be trying to get, rain and all that other stuff too. But I do believe that it's kind of like they know there's something about this place. And obviously through like, especially like in South America and stuff, they commune with the spirits through pharmakia, sorcery, through ayahuasca, the vine of the dead. And this literally lets them contact these ancient ancestors, which again, to a Christian's perspective, those are demons. And they're remnants of the Nephilim, the giants.
Right. Wild. So you talked about the megalithic structures and the theory of them being some sort of energy source. Is there anything else? Because I know we can kind of like maybe segue into Tartaria. I know the big thing about Tartaria is those, correct me if I'm wrong, but those structures were built to house energy as well, right? In very similar fashion.
Well, that is the theory that it's kind of like the way that, like, so if you guys are, if the people are not familiar, like the Tatarian buildings, Tataria is kind of a catch-all for old world structures, very like advanced looking Greco-Roman buildings that we don't really quite understand, like cathedrals and things like that. Now Tataria is interesting because it actually is an old map. It's actually if I could pan up, it shows Tataria on this map I've got, and it shows it like where Russia is, modern day Russia is. Now some people will just paint all the old world stuff and say it's all Tataria. This was this advanced empire that's been covered up. Now, I think that's a bit simplistic. It does seem like they've tried to cover up this empire, though, for whatever reason. Like that, again, even if it's on a bunch of old maps, so you just look it up. I mean, this is not, that is a conspiracy of I don't know what. Now, I believe that I'm starting to come to the conclusion now. I think that a lot of those old buildings are Roman, remnants of the Roman Empire. That's why they're all Greco-Roman. Now, not all of them are. I guess the cathedrals might be an outlier to that, and they might be something that was done later. But I think, that being said, there's all these buildings that seem almost overbuilt. Like, I mean, they're so intricate where they have these designs, especially like in the cathedrals. They have like these rose windows that have like cymatic patterns in the windows, and just different designs. And obviously when you see like lots of the old pictures of them, they have these lots of antennas and things like that. And of course they just say they're like lightning rods. But then when you have the copper domes, you have these copper roofs, you have like these columns that literally could be like a battery. I mean, like they got iron rods through them. There's a lot of people have theorized that these buildings were for a purpose. And then a lot of times they're surrounded by water. And so people have theorized somehow through these buildings they might be able to pull energy from the ether through like electromagnetism and things like that, and they have these towers that could also do that.
I heard that
I think it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I heard that it brings in like, I've heard two theories on that. Like, there's the Earth's natural, like, it has like electromagnetic field, like it pulls in the energy, and then they can use free energy. But I also heard that for some of those, the points at the top of those, like Zeppelins could come in and get
mooring stations.
Yeah, mooring stations, exactly. And then they could keep going. Zeppelins used to be a lot more popular than I think they teach us. But also, if you notice in a lot of the skies, when you go back to the Chicago Fair and stuff like that, it's whited out. It's like back in the days, Photoshop, because something more was going on. Yeah, vanilla skies. They don't want you to know something else was going on. And I just find like it's cool and everything. Cathedrals, they even took away the bells too, because those gave you literally would heal your physical body through certain frequencies. I've heard that as well. I tend to believe that though, because there was sacred geometry and all sorts of stuff. And even in some, like I used to live in New York, and I went to these huge cathedrals, and I could see like, even in downtown Manhattan and Brooklyn, you could see like these gigantic, like Tartarian looking buildings, or Roman looking buildings with the copper on top. Some in Times Square even have gold on top. So I was like, there's definitely something more to the white skies and stuff they weren't trying to show. I do believe that we had there was more technology back then than we even have today, and I believe that's so with the Bible times as well. But what are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I think you're right on when we talk about the frequencies and the vibration, because that's another thing that after like the 1800s they started removing all these bells. Bells were a very common thing, and I think it does have something to do with frequencies and vibrations, and yeah, there's healing properties with these things. I don't fully understand it. I've heard. I mean, obviously, I've heard people talk about that, and it does make sense. I do think, again, you go all the way back to the days of Noah. A lot of people have theorized that somehow they could move these blocks through vibrations. I think that makes sense, because I feel like that's sort of like we're looking for technology in a certain kind of way because we only know it like basically through our phones and certain electronic devices. But it does seem like that frequencies and vibrations have a lot to do with a technology that we're not talking about. And
well, there was a man here there was a man here in Florida that had like he did just that in like on towards the Keys. And
is that the Coral Castle?
Yeah, the Coral Castle. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, so he did just that, and it's very interesting because every report of that says, like I saw him, like he's making weird noises and stuff at night. Apparently, he did it just overnight, just completely overnight. I don't know, but yeah, what are your thoughts on that as well?
Monroe Institute as well, right? The whole CIA operation with the binaural beats to sync the hemisphere of both sides of your brain. Have you heard of that?
I have not, no.
Oh, wow. You have to check that out. Yeah, the Monroe Institute was used in the MK Ultra.
Oh, wow.
You know what's interesting? I was actually, since a couple of you guys are from Florida, last year I went to around the Orlando area, and I went to the Bach Tower. Have you guys been over there?
No, but I'm going to go tomorrow.
Yeah, you got to tell us now.
You go check it out. Yeah, so supposedly it's obviously one of these stories, and I think just to lay it out there for 1 second though, like, so a lot of people who believe in the old world, we believe that buildings that exist from the old world are given like phony stories of when they were built and why they were built and who they were built for and who built them. So like there's lots of there's lots of these structures that, like, obviously one of the best examples is just like Washington D.C. They'll say they just built it just based on like Thomas Jefferson, like the Roman architecture. It seems a little simplistic that they would do it like that. And I think that like the stories behind how they did it with horse and wagons and whatever tools they had, it makes no sense. But there's lots of examples just in just random places. And I would say that I since I started doing research on all these topics, when I go out of town, obviously I look for whatever the weirdest thing I can find. So I went with the wife, and the girls were having this cheerleading competition, and we had some time to kill. And so I was in Orlando, and I was looking for like national parks or something, maybe some cool Indian stuff that is down there, maybe some Seminole stuff. I don't know, like maybe because they always have giant legends. Well, what I found is that Bach Tower, and it was supposedly, I forgot what the guy supposedly did, but it's like on this orange orchard or whatever, and there's just the weirdest towers. I mean, like straight out of like, I don't know, seems like medieval type times in like Great Britain, really ornate. It's got these chimes that go off at a certain time. It's got a motor around it. It's just got it's pretty crazy. It's creepy, but it's like this giant land over here, and the story is just. What was really interesting is that it was doing all these chimes, and we were taking pictures of it, and I did a little video while I was there, and the thing almost had like a halo around it, and you just know that there's something more to this place than what we're told, and I just thought, I was wondering if you guys should go check it out. And I'd like to hear what your thoughts are, because it does not belong. And actually, I forgot, somebody else told me there was one maybe in California that is something really similar, but yeah, like it makes it sounds like a creepy music box. Like they play it every so often, and there's just no way that this doesn't have something to do with frequencies and vibrations, and there's a purpose to this thing. You could say it's beautiful, and it is, but I think that there was something more to it, and I don't claim to have all the answers for these things. I just think that's. Right. I feel like we're kind of scratching the surface on like what these things.
Oh, it went away, Steve. Yeah.
Let me see here.
So that thing had you could see the energy around it, huh? You could pretty much see a halo around it.
Yeah,
you could physically see it.
Yeah, it was real. It was very odd, and so I mean, I don't know what it means, but yeah, like you guys know that doesn't belong in Florida.
Well, our next trip is Bach Towers, boys.
Yeah, go check it out. Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm closer to the California one. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, Jesse.
Careful on that one, Jesse.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I think there's so much. I want to get your thoughts on this, JT, but there's so much a part of history that's not just lost, but I do think it's hidden. I think a lot of things are hidden from the normal education today. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, I'm one of those people who believe that, like, a good example is just like that. You really think about like our history, the way we're taught in America is really a short amount of history. We like basically don't learn a whole lot past like, a couple lines about Columbus and the early settlers, and then we get to like 1776, and then the Revolutionary War, and then the Civil War, and then that's kind of how it ends usually in history class. Like we don't really learn much past that. We don't even really learn until the early 1900s about what happened. So I think that again, like I think that the Rockefellers are kind of credited with the modern school system, the public schools, and then obviously you have all the big robber barons kind of set up the system in order to churn out little cogs for their factories to work the machines and make the widgets and do all the things. So they don't really want us to know why. That's like how history classes in for us in America would be like, memorize this date, memorize this guy's name, memorize these things. But it's like everything else in school. If there's no practical use to it, like you'll just forget. And they don't care that they want you to be blind.
Yeah, they want you to be blind. They don't want you to be like, they want us, who quoted it? They want us to be smart enough to do the work, but dumb enough not to question it, right? Like,
yeah, that's basically it. Because I would say that
Henry Ford or something like that.
Because it's kind of like the interesting part about history is the motivations of the people and like why they did certain things versus what was done. Like the why is more important than the what most of the time. And so the more I started to dig into history, I think that the old world is a real good place to start, because you're just like, this doesn't make any sense based on what we're taught. And I've made quite a few little videos just saying like the story of like westward expansion in the United States. It's just like the timeline seems way too small to accomplish all of the things that they did. Like I said, there's the story of Lewis and Clark. I mean, they literally just went across the Mississippi in 1803. So that was the time of Louisiana Purchase. And meanwhile, by 1900, like everything is complete in America. Like everything, like we have a fully formed country when we're taught like that there was hardly any, even, I got a fact once I'm wrong. I was thinking Chicago was west of the Mississippi, but it's kind of just east of it. But it was still in a French territory. It was not purchased in the Louisiana Purchase, but it was kind of in that area. So you just think about like, just take the East Coast, and that's really all that there is in the United States at 1800. But by 1900, you have all those big Western cities are all developed, and that includes Chicago, which Chicago, it was a French territory, I think, right around 1800. So like, it's not, or just past that, like there's nobody there. And so you think like you can understand maybe like New York's and the Bostons and the Philadelphias, because those are got older history to them. But these other cities, it's like we're just taught that these people just moved west and then just built cities. Like, like there's a gold rush in California, so therefore that all these people move out there. Okay, I got it. So why did they build Chicago like they did? They just decided to build that city right there, and they built like a city that's comparable to all the other major cities around the world. And like, who did it? And so you have all these places being built from the ground up, like literally, or under the ground up at a very primitive time, at least we're taught. I do not believe that they had that many construction workers, master masons and craftsmen and things like that. And you don't have the materials, you don't have the logistics, you could not build things, you don't have roads. The railroads were not even developed then. So like, how did they get all the materials from the quarries to the places, the people? Where did they stay when they're building the place? Like, that being said, yeah, I've dug into history, and I found some really interesting things actually really recently, where as Christians I've really questioned the timeline. A lot of people have said, and I'm sure you guys have probably heard people say that they've added 1,000 years to our timeline, or they took 1,000 years away. And I've heard that, and I believe that in some ways I knew that was true, but I heard some people would say, oh, well, you see these old dates, and sometimes it's like 1655 and it looks like an I or it looks like a J. And somebody's saying, so actually it's not 1655, it's just 655. But there's the J or the I, and the I either is from Izizos or it's from Jesus. So it's like, it's the Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, and it's this number. Now, I think that's simplistic. I don't think it's 1,000 years. But what was really interesting through our research recently, we found this German researcher, author, professor, sociologist, economist, and he did this really interesting presentation about how they added 700 years to the first millennia. And I think that explains in a lot of ways of like, when people talk about the Dark Ages, the reason they call them the Dark Ages is because there was like this halt in human development. Like that they had all these Roman structures, and there was no advancement in architecture, language, or culture during this, for 1,000 years. And so what this guy basically was theorizing based on like stratigraphy, which is would be like archaeological, like digging into the ground. So if there's an older civilization down here, you could dig under the ground and find it under, like people built on top of older places. So you'd be able to find evidence of the older place. But through that 1,000 years, there's only one level. There's nothing under the Roman stuff. It's all Roman. And so he was theorizing that in the first millennia, there was just 300 years. So there was like 700 years of like fluff added. And yeah, obviously why they did that, I think that, well, he mentions that there was 3 basically cataclysmic events, at least recorded in history during the first millennia. There was like one in early antiquity, one in mid-antiquity, and then one in late antiquity. He theorized they were not 1, 2, 3 chronologically. They were all the same one. And so that's when I get into like this stuff in the book of Revelation. I think that a lot of that stuff happened. And I think that's why that eventually they started dating things Anno Domini. Isn't it weird that people just kind of take for granted, like one day they just said they were counting up Anno Lumini from the year of light. And then one day they just said, we're just going to count it from Jesus' birth. And then, but why? Even as a Christian, I would think it would be sort of weird to do that. If you could accurately date back to creation, I think that that'd be the way to date. But I think the reason they started dating things Anno Domini is because they lived post-apocalypse, and they said, all we really know is we live after Jesus. And then they looked at the book of Revelation, they said, there's 1,000 years here. Maybe it was about 1,000 years ago Jesus lived. And then they started dating things back, and it was only later that people tried to fill in the history that was like, there's a lot of fluff in there. And that's why people didn't advance. It's because they did. It it came to a giant reset, and then people had a foggy memory about what happened before.
That's wild. I mean, I think it's plausible. I think it's possible. I especially with the Dark Ages and the kind of the lost history in that time. It seems
Mm-hmm.
like it's lost history because there's nothing. I mean, there's nothing much recorded in those times, right? That's why they're kind of called the Dark Ages.
Yeah, well, 100%. Well, that's what I said. That it's because they claim that civilization did not advance at all.
Right.
But so the most advanced things they had were Roman structures, Roman language, Roman things like that. And it's like that they show different peaks of different little parts of Europe and the Middle East where they say, oh, it's like the Arabs at one point they took the torch and they became the advanced one with math and the ability to build things. But he's, like this guy Gunnar Heinsohn was theorizing, but no, it's all in the same time period. That's why all the advanced people had Roman knowledge because they all lived under the Roman Empire. So he's saying like these things are not separated by all these years. These are the same time period. And then when Rome fell, it fell hard and everything collapsed. Like, because Rome was the world. And so whenever this cataclysm hit this world, like all the writings were lost. And this actually explains a lot to me because when I started to look into history, I never understood how they forgot how to do things the Romans did. Because I was always like, wait a minute, the Romans wrote everything down. So like, how is Roman concrete better than the concrete we have today? That makes no sense to me.
Well, you could see it too by the roads, just as simple as the
right,
roads.
The Roman roads last a lot longer than the current roads do.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
but yeah, how was that ever lost if we're told history progressed in a certain kind of way? Like, how was the Romans more advanced than the Europeans for forever? Really, it makes no sense because Rome was not Italians. Rome was a different thing. Rome was like a system. It was like Babylon. Isn't it interesting in the Bible it calls the Babylonians, they doesn't really call them Babylonians, it calls them Chaldeans. So the Babylon was like a system, Rome was a system, and Rome was the beast. Rome was the thing that conquered the whole world. So the Arabs were Romans. Paul was a Roman. I mean, it says in the Bible, like Paul was a Roman citizen. So like different people from different places were Romans. So if Rome was this empire, then they set up governors and prefects and they gave people citizenship in different places. So it's not like the city of Rome gets sacked and then, okay, Rome fell. No, but the people in Paris were Romans. The people in London were Romans, Londinium. So if one of the cities fell, that those people still would have had the knowledge unless something really big happened and they all fell at the same time. Like, I'm talking on the level of like the book of Revelation, something biblical. That's where you get into like the old world stuff, is everyone talks about the mud flood. Well, so in this video, I've never seen some of this evidence that Gunnar Heinsohn was showing these illustrations of Rome from the 1500s, and it's literally covered in mud. And there's like parts of it, they're digging it out. And so people always question what happened. Where did the mud flood come from? People theorize that maybe it's something that happened like in the 1700s, because we're seeing pictures in the 1800s of like weird, eerie cities with mud everywhere. But I never could really put the mud flood on the level of Revelation until you take that 700 years away. You basically, if you count backwards, you're talking about the times of Jesus almost being like in the 800 range. And so then if Armageddon was after that, now you're talking about like 1,000 years ago. And then you think about all the mud flooded structures, the structures that have like sediment up to the first floor, past the first floor. It actually makes sense, because a lot of these structures are Greco-Roman. Maybe they lied at the extent of Rome and how far it reached into the world. Maybe places like Washington, D.C. are evidence that the Romans did make it over to North America. And that's why these things all have the mud flooded look too, because they all experienced the same cataclysm that Rome suffered, and then all the places around the earth did, like even places in London, buried things. They have this something, I believe they say that a third of the earth is covered something called dark earth, where it's like literally scorched with fervent heat, creates it. So you have a third of the earth covered by deserts. You got a third of the earth covered with this dark earth, and even science even says, I think that they claim at some point a third of the sea life died. Guys, that's all stuff from the Book of Revelation. And
wild.
I think that when you see it kind of stretched out over 1,000 years, it seems like, I mean, a little more disconnected. But if it was all the same event and it was all culminates around the same time Jesus was on the earth or just afterwards, now you're talking about like, wow, did all the things that a lot of people are looking forward to about the third temple and the Antichrist and all that stuff, what if that stuff happened like 1,000 years ago? I think that it did.
That's wild. That's wild.
Wow.
Now, I do
Wow.
know there's a lot of instances where, like how the Library of Alexandria, right? We know that it burned down and it totally got destroyed, right? And there's a purpose behind that. I'm sure you've heard of the Great Fires of the 1800s and things like that. Do you think do you think there was some sort of documentation to support this theory and they just started wiping it out? Or do you think it's just something that's always been hidden since before the Dark Ages?
Well, I would say that it's interesting how so this guy Gunnar, who I've been quoting, and if you guys want to find more on this, I just broke down a couple on my YouTube channel. I broke down through 3 different videos with my buddy Paul from Understanding Conspiracy. We all break through his lecture, but he mentions, and he's not a Christian, so he's not trying to prove our worldview. He obviously he's on the side of science. He's the one who's trying to just do his best, and it's his belief that the reason these things are dated incorrectly is because you had legitimate people trying to fill in these gaps in history, and they did their best. Now, obviously, I believe that there's the secret societies who do know more about what happened. I believe that the Vatican, they say, has 53 miles worth of bookshelves in their secret library. Now, that is absolutely insane. So, what kind of books could be there? What kind of knowledge could be from before? Obviously, the answer is, no telling. It could be everything. It might not have it at all. But I do wonder, I was thinking about that the other day about how the fire and the burning down of Alexandria and the loss of the library. Well, there's an interesting story in the times of Marcus Aurelius, too, that Rome burned and a bunch of all their records got burned up in those fires, too. I wonder if it's the same. I wonder if this is the same fire. I wonder if obviously I know Alexandria is in Egypt, but it's a similar story where all this knowledge got lost. I do believe that some of this was lost. It had to be because again, because I think that if some people retain the knowledge of some of the Roman technology, I believe they would have built more things like the Romans did afterwards. But they stopped. And again, it makes no sense that you go into Roman structures. I think they say the Pantheon in Rome has the biggest unsupported concrete dome in the whole world still today. So the Romans did things on a level that it's hard to understand. It's hard to understand when you see the size of these places, the size of the doors, and why they did it. So, I'm still just wondering this because this is kind of new to me too. That what if the Romans really did have advanced knowledge of harnessing energy, and they had a way of renewable clean energy through the ether and through different means? All we know is that they had advanced buildings. And I said, it really does not make sense to me in the same way that it doesn't make sense that the Egyptians had knowledge of the stars, they had knowledge of mathematics, chemistry, they could create great buildings, but they didn't know how to make advanced tools to make it easier on themselves. So that's really all we're told is that they had all the things that we have, except for they never found an easier way to do it. So to me, it's I think they had a different way. They obviously had something else that we don't know about. And so how advanced were the Romans? Well, based on them conquering the whole world, I don't think they just had a certain style of military that they could just, their army could not dominate the whole world if that's all they did. You know what I'm saying? That they had to have something else to keep the world in order, in check. And I don't know. I guess I said, I really don't know. I don't know, but I do believe that that's what the secret societies are about, is any of that knowledge. I do believe they have something. Maybe some of that stuff could be that they've leaked out certain things over the past couple hundred years. They invented things, and maybe they're not new. Maybe they're really old.
So, I mean, this kind of gets us into the whole subject of Satan's little season, right? To where this is, just break that down to us a little bit, what Satan's little season is based off the eschatology study of Revelation and everything like that.
Yeah, so I think that's basically what I'm saying, is like that a lot of people are looking for Jesus to come back, but if you read the scriptures again, you'll find out that he's telling them he's coming back right away. Like he's the times Jesus shows up has something to do with the prophecies in Daniel. So Daniel, there's a 70-week prophecy, and it starts with the proclaim to rebuild the temple. So this, because at the time of Daniel, the temple was in ruins, Jerusalem was in ruins, Israel was in captivity, Jerusalem was in the Jews were in captivity. So after that 70 weeks, which is 7 times 7 years, 70 times 7 years, 490 years. That culminates with around the times of Jesus, when he shows up for his ministry. And then Jesus talks about like that those around me are going to see me coming back. He mentions that he tells all the apostles. So all these things are relevant to this time. Like I said, we could go deeply into the scriptures, but specifically, if you go into like Matthew 24, Luke 21, and Mark 13, it starts with Jesus is telling the apostles the temple is going to be destroyed. And so then they ask him when. And then so when they ask him when, he details all the things that are going to happen first. What are the signs? When will this thing be, and when will be the signs, and what will be the signs of your coming? And so he details all these things, and he goes line by line. He goes all in order. And remember, the apostles are asking him alone. So he's not speaking in code. He's telling them plainly. And at the end of it, he says, truly, I tell you, before this generation passes away, all these things will take place. So a biblical generation is 40 years. You think about 40 years in the wilderness, 40 years later, after Jesus says that, around that time, the temple's destroyed, Jerusalem's destroyed. I mean, specifically,
70 AD, right? This is 70
yeah,
AD
70 AD. So well, again, the timeline might be a little bit different, but if what we're taught is that Jesus likely said that he got crucified around 30 AD, 70 AD, Jerusalem's destroyed. So what's really interesting about that is the Bible talks about the time of Jacob's trouble, and it gives it a time period. It gives it 1,290 days. In the book of Revelation, chapter 11, it says that the nations, the Gentiles, are given 42 months to trample on the holy city. So the Roman-Jewish war started in 66 AD, and in 70 AD, it was 42 months long. That is quite a coincidence if it's not exactly the events he's talking about. So again, that's the destruction of Jerusalem, but then later the beast is judged. The beast is judged afterwards. I believe Rome is the beast. Rome is the 7-headed dragon that's mentioned in the book of Revelation. The whore of Babylon is Jerusalem. Go into the Old Testament. Jerusalem's called the whore a million times. It even says, I think Jesus says in Matthew 23, that all the innocent blood on the earth is going to be on their hands. Revelation chapter, I believe 18, mentions that the blood of all the innocent was found in the whore, who was destroyed by the beast. So like, I think it's pretty plain that that's what that was speaking of. And then obviously later, the Bible goes dark. Well, there's nothing else that happens after that. There's 7 churches in the book of Revelation that these letters are written to. I mean, again, this is literally written to 7 literal churches in this certain part of Asia, in Turkey. And those churches do not exist anymore. Those churches had to be excavated. They had to be dug up out of the ground. So like dispensationalists will try to say, oh, they represent other churches. But they were real churches, right? So like if they were real churches and Jesus was saying like tribulation was coming, I'm going to come back soon. Okay, so if he did not do that, wouldn't he have not kept his promises? So I mean, to me, it's like, it seems real obvious that was happening then. Even, was it Revelation 1:9? I believe it's John says, I'm your brother in tribulation. I think Revelation 22, maybe verse 4, I believe. John is told not to seal up the book because the time is at hand, which is the contrast from, maybe it's actually Daniel 12:4, that Daniel is told to seal up this book because until the times of the end. So Daniel's saying to seal up the book, or is told to seal up the book. John is told not to because all the things are about to happen. Okay, so with that being said, if those things did happen, has everything been fulfilled? Well, there's an interesting part in Revelation chapter 20 that after the Battle of Armageddon, Jesus and the saints rule for 1,000 years. And during that time, the devil is bound, put in a pit so he cannot deceive anyone anymore. And then after the 1,000 years is over, the devil is let out for a little season, a short season, and he deceives the nations, gathers them together. They come fight against the camp of the saints, and they're burned up by fire. That's like that's the Gog Magog battle, like what people would call it. But that's where we're kind of getting into like, I'm of the belief that no, not everything's been fulfilled, because I don't believe this is a new heaven and new earth. I believe that it seems really clear to me that the devil is very active right now. Obviously, I don't know if there's ever been a more deceptive time than the times we're living in. And I remember when I first read that chapter, I thought, wait a minute, how is the devil going to deceive everyone? If Jesus is reigning in Jerusalem and everything's great, like how would he get people to go fight against him? And I started to think like, maybe it's not like I think it's going to be then, because obviously could the devil deceive people if he deceived everyone? So yeah, could you be deceived in that time? And so the answer with humility would have to be, yeah, I think that you could be. And so that's when I started to actually really try to, again, reread the Gospels again. And I noticed that the kingdom Jesus is talking about, he literally tells the Pharisees, it's in Luke 17, he says, the kingdom is not coming in ways that can be observed. He's saying like the kingdom is in the midst of you, and he's talking about himself. And in Matthew, he always refers to the kingdom as the kingdom of heaven. So I started to understand, like, so there's, in Revelation chapter 21, it mentions New Jerusalem comes down. The bride comes down. I believe that it also in Galatians, I think, chapter 3, it mentions New Jerusalem is the Jerusalem that's above. The Jerusalem that's below is Hagar. It's in slavery. The Jerusalem that's above is freedom. It's like it's the promise, the new covenant. Hebrews 12, it mentions New Jerusalem, the heavenly Jerusalem. So I believe saints die, they get resurrected, they go to New Jerusalem, and that's where they reign from. And it was never like it was never like what I thought it was going to be. And that's how the devil could deceive people during that time.
Where do you think? Where do you think the devil's going to take his throne again? Do you think it's going to be in Jerusalem? Do you think it's going to be?
Well, I don't know that the devil is ever said to take his throne. Like it really doesn't say. Because it's really like, so obviously once Jesus did the work on the cross, he ascended to the right hand of the Father, and at that point, he was given all authority on heaven and earth, and he is the king. So the devil, obviously, the only means that he can rule now is by deception, which is interesting if you think in the way that, like, that whole, like, what Usual Suspects meme that says the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he did not exist. So if there was a time back when he might be referred to as, Baal or Zeus or Marduk or whatever kind of pagan god, he could be represented as Jupiter. And there's statues of him, and people worship him openly. But now it's like, oh, well, Jupiter really never existed. Zeus was always mythology. And so now now his statues are kind of like tongue in cheek. It's like, oh, well, we know that that's just an homage to this certain time. And I believe that the elites, the people in the secret societies, they might call him Inky, I believe. He would be like their god in a different kind of way. Like they would refer to him as a different kind of being, and not everyone would really know. So I think that like he rules through the wickedness of men's hearts, their lust for power and greed and materialistic things. And so there might be certain people who know, but most people do not know. And that's how the devil can deceive people now. Because again, if you really think about it, like, he could not convince people willingly to go on the suicide mission against God, basically. Like, you can't. I mean, that's what never that's what never made any sense. It's like, if you knew the God King was down here and the devil who just got out of the bottomless pit saying, "Hey, everybody, let's go fight him," you'd be like, "You serious? No,
Right.
no, like, we can't win." But somehow he convinces people to go do that anyways. And I think that that's the only way he can rule. He's never going to be able to take a throne for everyone to see, because he'd expose himself. He's trying to get us people to go do things willingly through deception.
Right.
So do you think he's actually a physical being still roaming the earth today?
That's interesting. Have you guys seen that show, The Rings of Power? You guys, anybody watch that?
Yeah,
I do kind of wonder. I'm watching that show now. I'm thinking, like, yeah, I'm kind of seeing, like, Sauron is that like how the devil is kind of, because obviously he I mean, I think it seems pretty obvious that, like, that show's he's meant to represent him. But if you guys have not seen the show, like, Sauron actually has a physical form like a person, but then he's killed, and then but he's really not a person. He's appearing like one. And then it's funny, like, he's got he turns into, like, he basically bleeds out this black goo, and then the black goo eventually, co-opts another person, and then he regains a physical form again. But I started to wonder, the black goo is everywhere, but obviously it's obviously some kind of satanic thing. And sometimes they make it look like, like Venom from outer space, but Venom's a demon too. I think it's really interesting concept that, like, yeah, so could the devil literally be appearing as a man right now, like on the world stage, and we just don't know who he is, and that's how he's directing people in a more tangible way. And maybe he can manifest himself in a different kind of way to people when he wants to. I don't know. It's interesting that a lot of mythologies all around the world mention spirits coming down, giving up their first estate, like it says in the book of Jude. They went from spirits to flesh, to some kind of physical form, and then they were not able to take that spirit form again. So it's like they cannot go back to heaven again. They cannot go back to being stars again. They are now here, and they're trapped here. And maybe that's where all the mythology is about reptilians and weird things, shapeshifters and stuff like that. Maybe that's true. I really don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, there's obviously, again, mythologies about these superior beings that live inside the earth. Maybe they live inside the earth. Maybe there's something in there, but no, that show's really kind of tripped me out, where I'm like, man, I wonder if that could be true. Because it's like, you see the way they showed Sauron being the deceiver, and they say, "Who are you?" Well, I've had many names. So he's obviously very clearly saying, like,
exactly, just like God has many names.
It says that.
Yeah,
I've had many.
Oh
names.
yeah, no,
okay,
it's like it's trying really hard to paint him as the devil.
Oh yeah,
but it's interesting in the way too that, like, kind of like an Thanos kind of vibes, where it's like it's like he believes I mean, at least they're presenting him like he really does believe the things he's saying. Like, he's going to make this world better. He's like, his goal is to heal this place. And it does kind of seem like that's why some of the elites they view him as an angel of light. They view him as what he's trying. He's actually got a good goal, but it's like the ends justify the means. So whatever wicked thing he's trying to do is worth it, because he really does have our best intentions in mind eventually. And if we're with him, we'll rule with him. And if you're apart from him, then obviously you get stomped on, and it doesn't matter, because we have to remake this place in his image. It's real. I mean, I kind of think it's pretty well done the way it's done, because I thought it really has made me think, like, dang, I wonder if that could be true.
So what are your thoughts on, with all this predictive programming, right? Since it's basically what we're talking about, it seems like, and when we look, it seems like something's getting set up. It seems like a new lifestyle of the world is getting prepared in a way, rooted from deep within the ground, and we're just starting to see things come up to the surface in a way. And what I'm saying is you've got Elon Musk, you've got the Neuralink technology, you've got the alien disclosure going on. There's a lot of interesting topics that are and viewpoints that are being brought to people's attention when it used to be, whack job theories 10, 15 years ago, and we see that things are coming to the realistic point of view of the natural man today. But my point is what are your thoughts on all of that? What do you think is building up here?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Like, so before I came to the conclusion that we were past the millennial reign, or at least past the return of Jesus, I was of the belief that like obviously the Book of Revelation's unfolding. We're approaching a one world government, mark of the beast, potential Antichrist, third temple, all that stuff. I do think it's interesting in the way that it does seem like a lot of that stuff does seem like it could be true. I mean, it almost seems like obviously true. And I think a lot of people were saying, well, it's so obvious. And that's why I was saying, like, but don't you think, and a lot of people always caution me, but don't you think that the enemy knows what the book says? So what if they were just trying to manifest some of these things? And so I started to really thinking about that. If you could have a one world government when Satan deceives the nations and they're gathered together to go fight against the camp of the saints. So what if this is a cyclical thing and some of these things do repeat? And it's like, so God's the same, people are sort of the same, the devil's the same. So these cycles kind of repeat.
I was going to say this earlier. Sorry to interrupt you. The Ecclesiastes 1:9, what has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. Like that just totally rings a bell right there.
Yeah, it's like the devil's lies have not really changed all that much. And obviously because he knows how to deceive people in the way they're going to be deceived. So like that he's only got so many things to offer people, right? In the same way that he takes Jesus up to a high place and says, bow down and worship me and I'll give you all these kingdoms. So that's the deal he gives everyone, so that's the deal he gives the elites. And so some of these things kind of would look similar than they would like biblical prophecy if you're thinking kind of abstractly. Yeah, I think that kind of makes sense. I do wonder that, so what if it's the predictive programming is in order to project this idea that the Book of Revelation is happening right now. And then so people who are waiting on the rapture will be sitting on their hands and they'll say, well, this stuff's going to happen anyways. And when the opposite could be true, because if God has given us authority and we are connected with the kingdom and he's given us authority to go do things and proclaim the kingdoms here, that's that seems to me much a more active role for the church versus a very passive role, just waiting to be persecuted, like just waiting for persecution or just waiting to be disappeared at any moment. I think it's interesting in the way that some people would point to that country in Palestine. People call them Israel. Like, is that the real people there? Is that the people that we're supposed to support no matter what? No, I don't think it is. Whether they're actually literally related to Jacob or not, I think that's irrelevant, because the Bible clearly says that the true Jews, people who are his, believe in the promise of him. So like if you deny him, that's spirit of Antichrist right there. So when people are looking for the Antichrist, it's like, well, the Antichrist is a spirit. It's a denial of Jesus. So like if those people are denying Jesus now, and then you literally have the church sending money over there and supporting no matter what they do, like whether it's like, turning a blind eye to atrocities that are happening overseas. And, you could still say, well, they're our best ally. Well, that's debatable. But even so, like that, what if they could do anything they want to because they're teaching people this message that, oh no, well, God's going to do all these things for them later, so we still have to support them. And then meanwhile, they could literally be robbing us blind in the West and also trying to solidify a power base that will eventually be a one world government that's like tyranny, that eventually ends up with a big war against the person you don't want to go to war with.
I definitely do think they're setting us up to be tricked. I do know that, there are people who reside in Israel who are not God's chosen people, who are acting like they are. But I also know that there are the real ones some of them are over there too, but also spread throughout the earth, like the Bible tells us as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my beliefs. But I just, it's such a hot topic too for a lot of people. And then if you say you don't support it, then they're like, "Oh my gosh, how dare you?" But like, like I definitely do believe we are being duped with that whole topic. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's crazy. It's crazy to me when like, and I know we don't go too deeply on YouTube talking about this, but I think it's kind of funny when you have like the right wingers who they'll be all about free speech and they'll be the anti woke people, and then if you say, I don't think it's cool that Israel's bombing civilians, and they'll be like, you're anti-Semitic. Isn't that weird? Don't you think that's a little bit weird how they're so quick to call you racist? Like, wait a minute. Let's just say you could say that I might have some of my facts wrong, but it's not because I hate the people who are shooting the bombs. I think that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not really taking sides, and I don't see it as just terrorists versus, the good God's chosen people. I see this as, I don't support whatever this is.
Right. It's very hypocritical of that side.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, but it is interesting, but they're like, that you can have many people who would agree with 99% of the things I said in this podcast. And if I said that I would say like, no, I don't dislike anybody based on where they're from or what color they are, or, even like I said, it's like that. I understand that based on the gospel is that you're my brother if you believe like I do. It's not who you're related to. It's not what color skin you are. Like, we're brothers and sisters in Christ if we believe in Jesus. And so like that, I would understand that even if the terrorists are bad, and even if it is just terrorists, they have the same opportunity to accept Jesus as the people who claim to be related to Jacob, and if neither of them decide to accept Jesus, well, then they all go to the same place, and it's not a good place, so like that's like, we're talking about very fleshly things when us Christians should be kind of above that fray in the spirit. And like, so all that being said is like, that people ask like, well, why would they lie about this stuff? It's like, yes, because the devil would lie about that. Like, obviously he would get you to question where you are, when you are, and what your purpose is here now. And I think that, so you can have an active church that's proclaiming the kingdom. It's not accepting that the devil runs everything, because he's not king. Jesus is king. Christ is king. And then you could have the opposite be true and saying like, you have like the pre-trib people saying, well, I'm going to get out of here when everything gets bad anyway. So I'm just going to live my best life right now. I'm going to, I'm going to build up my castle in America, and I'm going to be fine from this. Or you can have the other people who are just saying like, well, we're actually going to actively support the enemy in its goal to do whatever it's going to do right now.
Yeah, that's I definitely believe we're being duped with that. And it's funny because I mean, I tend to believe that we're in here, there is no word rapture in the Bible, but God will take his people out eventually. But I think we have to endure long suffering, and we do have to go through these trials and tribulations. What are your thoughts on that though?
Well, I'm certainly of the belief that anybody who tells you that a follower of Christ is not going to suffer does not read their Bibles. Because, like, why would God put any of his, like, why would the early church get martyred? Why would they get martyred? Have you guys read the stories of the prophets? Did they all have it made? No. I mean, just read the story of Jeremiah and ask like, oh, how would God ever let his people suffer? It's like Jeremiah was told, you're going to go tell these people, Ezekiel too. And he basically said, these people are not going to listen to you, but I'm going to make you go tell them anyways. And you could just, like, Jeremiah was just like, I don't want to go tell them, because he knew what would happen, because he would get beat, he'd get almost killed, he's getting thrown in jail. It was not a fun job to go tell people what's true. And I think in the same way that's why Jesus said, if they hated you, if they hate you, they hated me first. You're going to be hated because of me. So telling people the truth does get you hated. So like, obviously it's like, woe to you if all men speak well of you, because their ancestors, their fathers spoke well of the false prophets. So when you're speaking the truth, you're going to face persecution. You're going to face, you're going to suffer for doing what's right. And obviously in some ways, you got to be willing to suffer, because obviously Jesus suffered for us, and if he was our example, well, then yeah, like, so obviously if it was, the book of Job tells you that people suffer even when they haven't done anything wrong. Obviously the story of Joseph tells you that. The story of Jesus certainly tells you that, because obviously he didn't bring that upon himself. So yeah, like, why would you expect any different? And I think that it's not that you will for sure, but you go back to like Romans 8:28, did God use all things together for the good for those who love him and call to his purpose? Well, of course, that's verses in there because he's saying you will probably suffer, because anybody could see the blessings from the blessings, but where are the blessings from the hard times? The things that cause endurance, and the reason that actually makes you, seek God and get closer to him. So yeah, I do believe that anybody tells you things are going to be easy is they're not.
You mean he's not going to rapture us out of here and we're just going to get out unscathed?
I mean, I guess it's like at the end of the day, it's like we don't know. Even if that was true, we don't know when God's calling us home. So like we would never know that. And it's kind of like that. Even the story in the parables of like that, blessed is the one who's doing what the master told him to do when I return. So it's kind of like that. Are you supposed to be just sitting there doing nothing, waiting for that? No, you're supposed to be doing what's right now, regardless of when it's going to be, because we don't know when our last breath's going to be. We don't know when we'll be taken out. We don't know how it'll happen. And gosh, I think most people wouldn't really want to know. Like, you should just be doing what you feel like God is telling you to do day by day and taking it one day at a time, because we don't have anything else besides that.
Yeah, preach the word, go forth into the world and preach the gospel.
Yeah. Tell people the kingdom's here.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the interesting part about it. It's like whether I'm right or I'm wrong. It's like that Jesus did tell them to go proclaim the kingdom is here. So if you're doing that, I mean, I think that it's like, regardless, it's like I think people who, whether they agree with me or not about the eschatology, they would agree with that Christ is king. I would hope, if we're all brothers in Christ. So like saying that we've got a promise, whether it's certain things happened a long time ago. So just to say this, to make it clear to everybody that I believe obviously salvation is still good today, even if you came back then. And we all have that promise of eternal life with God if we believe and we walk in faith. So I think that that's all we should be doing anyways,
Absolutely.
Regardless of where we are.
Right. Yep. I agree. I have to ask you this question. We brought it up not too long ago, but it was the black goo. I want to get your thought on this black goo. You've made some videos on your platform. You've talked about Hollywood and satanic rituals and what they portray in their music videos and everything like that. And I've seen the black goo like very heavily in these music videos, especially in Hollywood. But what is this subliminal messaging of this black goo? What do you think it's going to be?
I mean, what it's often depicted as is some kind of form of demon possession, is the way I see it. I mean, it's hard to say like that. I would love to be able to give you a biblical reference from like where they're getting this from, but I mean, it's like it's so pervasive in all the culture, the music video, it's in commercials, it's in movies, comic books. Yeah, I would say, like, I always usually go back to like the story of Venom. Venom is probably the most easy one to kind of like really be able to walk you through it. It's like, so the story of the symbiote. So before there was a Venom, there was this suit that Spider-Man wore. So Spider-Man obviously wore the red and the blue costume, and it was just a costume. Spider-Man already had superpowers. He made his little web shooters, but like his costume was literally just to hide his identity. So then, there was this comic book series called The Secret Wars, and so all the heroes went to go fight on some kind of alien world or something like that. Well, something happened to his costume, and then he got this. The alien people gave him this different costume, and it was a black Spider-Man. So of course, everyone thought, "Oh, that's awesome! He's got a black Spider-Man costume. It looks really cool." And so Spider-Man no longer needed his web shooters anymore, and he also got more powerful. And so at the beginning, it's like really good, but then suddenly, and what it was just like, it was black goo, but it eventually like formed a whole full costume on him. What it started to do, though, it started to change Spider-Man's personality. It started to like feel like it was overtaking him. He was getting like, he was not normal Peter Parker. He was something different. And so he started to realize that this thing was starting to consume him. And so interestingly enough, in the comic books, eventually he's trying to get the costume off and it won't come off. It's like literally possessing him. So he has to go to eventually he ends up in a church. He goes into a church, he climbs up to like the bell tower, and the bells actually vibrate the suit off him. So the suit comes off, and there's this other character named Eddie Brock, and eventually he hates Spider-Man. He was like kind of like a rival reporter or something like that. And the suit comes on him, and then he becomes Venom. And so, but the point is like that this thing is depicted as an alien, but it's more than an alien. It's kind of like a parasite. It's a symbiote. And then when the suit when the symbiote and the host get together, it's like they attain symbiosis, and then it makes this monster. Like, you know, that's what Venom is. Venom is like a Spider-Man-like thing, but he's literally like a monster that's bloodthirsty. He wants to bite heads off of things. And so that's really interesting because like Aleister Crowley famously said back in the day, he said that now we call them angels and demons, but one day we're going to call them something else. So then I believe we're in that someday else where they'll say, oh, now they're just aliens. So this is an alien from outer space. But again, it makes people stronger. It gives them more powers, but it also makes them depraved and bloodthirsty. So then you start to see like the pop stars doing videos, like with Billie Eilish has like black goop like coming out her eyes, and I think she might even have angel wings in that. I mean, it's like super demonic. Doja Cat, I mean, we talked about it. She had this video where the video is called Demons, or the song's called Demons. She's in a bathtub full of black goo. The black goo's coming out. There's a hand in the tub. Yeah, we were talking about also that there's a Venom promotion for the Tennessee Volunteers football team, and they have like a blacked out uniform, and this little thing creeps up on this football player wearing the normal Tennessee uniform, and eventually he's fighting it, and eventually he gives over to it, and he's like a monster. I mean, so like that is really pervasive, that it's shown everywhere. Oh, it was even who is it? Megan Fox. Supposedly she had some maternity reveal, and she shows herself all black gooed up, naked, and with a pregnant belly. Whether that's a real pregnant belly and she's a real
recent.
woman, that's debatable.
That's a man.
Yeah. But the point is like that. What is up with this? And again, then I said, pretty real easy example to correlate this is Sauron. Sauron in the Lord of the Rings series is basically like the devil. He's even presented as an evil eye in the Lord of the Rings, right? That's all he is. He's a lidless eye, kind of like your Illuminati eye on top of the pyramid, the Eye of Horus, the Eye of Ra, the sun god, all of those things. And then so he appears as a man. He's killed, but he's not a man because he's literally just this black evil essence. And then this evil essence possesses other people, and then he's who he is. It's almost like that they are trying to pay homage to Sauron, Satan, Saturn, however you want to put it, that they have made this bargain with this being that's given them power, but it's also made them more depraved. And that's why you get into like the sick habits these celebrities have with the Diddy parties and all those things. Like, why would they do those things?
Because they're demonically influenced. Yeah, and I believe that Lord of the Rings is telling us what's happening in real life. That's just me. It's one of my favorite movies. So like, I think they're literally telling us what's going on in real life, just in a little slight different tweak, but I think you're spot on the money with that one.
Well, you go back to like earlier in the show, we were talking about that. So why would the Aztecs sacrificing people on these temples, on these pyramids? Because they were trying to get knowledge and power from these fallen beings. And that's what they wanted. Because if those people were that depraved, or the demons, when they were flesh covered, they were that depraved when they were alive. So when they're undead, they are just as sick and depraved. So that's why you have these people who want materialistic things. They want fame and they want fortune. I don't know that they really wanted to do all the wicked things, but they're willing to do the wicked things in order to get the things. So I feel like that. I feel like that's a way of showing people who and what they're influenced by, and maybe that's like the whole idea of the revelation of the method. This is, I told you the truth. They believe in that karmic retribution, where it's like, if I told you what I'm going to do, if I told you I'm going to feed you rat poison, if you ate it, well then I'm off the hook because I told you the truth. And I think that there's so much. I mean, at this point, it's kind of like everyone has seen the Black Goose stuff, and I think a lot of people have asked about it. So I think that you kind of already know without even being told. It's evil with what they're showing you.
Right. I've had this theory for a long time, and I mean, it can come off like a steel man to the position you're coming from a little bit, but it seems like there's something to do with it to where it's kind of like an upgrade. And then especially with you got all this disclosure going on, and with the writings of these famous occultists talking about that the ascending masters are going to return at some point and they're going to be highly respectable on this earth. It just seems like maybe it's an object, or it's an upgrade that they're going to one day provide to humanity as like a mark, possibly. I don't know if it's going to maybe do something with Neuralink, maybe. But then to agree with your position, if we're talking about that there's going to be a battle, and there's going to be a battle at the end of the world, I see where you're coming from. I can see how the population of the world, like, how would Satan deceive them? And would it be possible to convince people to go to war with God, right? It's kind of like in the movies where you've got the Avengers movie, right? I think it's Infinity War or whatever it is. It's the first Avengers movie where Thanos is coming to Earth, and you've got the super heroes on Earth stating that Thanos is coming, right? And there's kind of like this point of view where Thanos is the bad guy, right? And what does he do in the middle of the movie? What's the whole purpose of his motivation?
He's going to wipe out half of humanity by snapping his fingers. He's like going to make people disappear. So I've done that, where I believe that that's a Gnostic inversion. I believe Thanos represents God. Right. And so the Avengers, even like I said, it's really obvious in the Marvel movies that Thor is a Norse god. The very beginning, the very first Thor movie, he literally gets cast out of heaven and for being prideful and being terrible. So it's like he literally epitomizes, like, I think that whole, demonic fallen angel spirit that, he literally gets cast out of heaven, and he's kind of like the top good guy to go battle against Thanos for the Avengers.
Right. And it makes me think to where, since it's going to be such a hard objective to complete, to deceive the world, to go to war with God, it's almost like the zombie theory, where you take this upgrade and you become this zombie figure where you submit to it and it controls you. So it's kind of like where Satan maybe will deploy this kind of technology to where people accept it, but then once they accept it, they're done for. They're no longer themselves. They can't rationally make decisions. So,
well, some people have, like, and I think that you could kind of correlate the two together, but I know that we've talked about that the Black Ooze also associated with, like, things like graphene and some kind of transhumanism type thing. But again, it's kind of like we could be talking just, past each other, because it's like, if you were part demon, you would be transhuman too. And so then, like, people on, like, Elon Musk saying that AI was summoning the demon, people obviously are if a computer ever really gained sentience, we know that it didn't really become alive. We know that, like, something could be using it to say it's alive, and something maybe that's undead. So I do think that, there's that component that, if you do accept some kind of thing that you just think is technology, what if it's not technology? It is an upgrade if all you're looking for is power and abilities. But obviously, spiritually, it could be, literally like, yeah, something on the level accepting the mark because you accepted something that you can't be redeemed if you're not fully human. Right?
Well, that's
Maybe
why
not. I don't think.
AI is demonic, like straight up. Like you see all these people talking to AI and stuff, and the majority are just claiming, "Yo, they're saying some like out of pocket stuff, like some dark stuff."
Mhm.
Like, well, there's a reason for that. You know what I'm saying? Like AI is demons literally talking to you. If you interact with it, it's going to interact with you. And I think we're at that time in history where I believe they're going to unveil some stuff like our star beings and ascended masters,
Mhm.
fallen angels, are going to be like, we created you. God's not real.
Yeah.
Take these
Mhm.
CRISPR upgrades, take this black goo, take this whatever it may have, you know, and they're just gonna try to spin their whole like new age propaganda garbage, you know, like, and
Yeah,
people
well,
are gonna eat it up like candy, you know what I'm saying? Like,
That's literally what I say because obviously I've changed my view on, like I said, eschatology, but in Ancient Angels, that's literally kind of what I say is that if something showed up that was from heaven and it's showing you that like you could be like me and you have to do this to be like me, it'd be very hard to argue with that being. Like I said, imagine if the being shows up looking like Thor and saying it's from the Palladians, and then it had something to do with your creation and the path of humanity, and you need to do this in order to evolve or to avoid a cataclysm. And I do believe that maybe that's kind of like the whole alien threat thing is like like the whole idea of Thanos coming on this giant ship. Like it's mentioned that New Jerusalem ascends down. So what if it was presented as an alien invasion? And then
like District
all the
9 or something.
yeah, or just District 9, or just like you think like Independence Day, like
Yeah.
the Earth bands together against a common threat, and then it's an extinction level threat, and so therefore we need to put away our differences. We'll all come together as one, and we'll all fight for humanity. But what if it's not an alien threat? What if it's God Himself revealing Himself at the end? I mean,
right. No,
I know
it's
I mean,
done.
it's the stuff that movies are made of, but I mean, I think that it's like that is why else are they trying to deceive us so badly about aliens? If it's not for that, so that's the whole kind of like William E. Cooper talking about Along Came a Pale Horse. It's like the idea that the government is one day going to try to deceive people in order to consolidate power. And what are they going to do with that power? Maybe
Right.
something really,
I mean,
maybe something even worse than you could even imagine.
It's not a huge stretch. I really don't think so. I think if anything,
No.
if we're dealing with an entity that's the father of all lies, and he's the greatest seducing, deceiving spirit of all creation, I don't think it's too far fetched at all, man. It's weird. We have to keep our minds lubricated on different types of angles on this, because and with the power of the Holy Spirit, you know, that God's gonna discern for us over time, and we're gonna see things, and things are gonna be obvious to us. But I just feel like we're kind of in the pregame as far as how
not
things
quite
are.
in. Where I think we might be in the end game.
Sure, end game. Yeah, there you go.
I think so too.
Yeah, I think we're in the end game. That's why I said it's interesting to think about like the whole idea of like that. Even the first Infinity War movie, it's literally fought under the dome, and you know who wins, right? You know, so who wins, and then eventually the end game is fought later. It's almost like, are they showing us that like that happened, and then they had they had to find some magical way to reverse it because they already did lose.
That's wild.
That's where you get into time traveling stuff, I think.
Yep,
too.
that's
But
could be the Mandela effect and like
Yeah.
quantum realm and all
jumping
all
through
the
different
stuff
dimensions and stuff. And who's that guy's
Exactly.
name who does that little whirly thing and jumps through portals? Like,
oh yeah,
his
Doctor
name?
Strange.
Yeah,
Yep.
Doctor Strange. Like, yo, they
Yeah,
straight
the
up do that in real life.
multiverse. They got to confuse the timeline. They got to just go. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's as crazy that sounds. I don't think people just make up stories like that. I think it comes from something.
Exactly. It's so crazy because all these like Marvel and all, you know, every movie basically is like pre-programmed what they're trying to tell us. Karmic law, you know, they have to tell us what's going on. And most people just think it's entertainment, so that's why they're getting away with it. But I just think it's up to people like us to put the puzzle pieces together and be like, yo, like, this is spiritual warfare, like for real, and
Mhm.
people are not being that. Oh, the devil's not real, whatever. That's like, bro, he's doing the biggest lie, like that he doesn't even exist, but he does, and he does exist, and sometimes he's different names to other people in different cultures and civilizations and stuff. It's just like he's been recycling himself over and over and over and over and over,
Mhm.
and it's just
Mhm.
like it's pretty obvious once you start to put the puzzle pieces together, in my opinion.
For sure.
Yeah, man. Well, we've hit that time limit for you, brother. Does anyone have any closing questions for
I was
you?
just wondering if you had any documentaries coming out or anything planned in the future.
Well, I think we might, Lord willing, maybe do something about the little season. I think that we're still kind of in the research phase. We actually did just start another podcast, the Ancient Angels podcast, with my buddy over on my buddy Demon Racer's channel. And so we're going to do more on that, and maybe, Lord willing, again, we might make more episodes of Ancient Angels, because there's a lot of things to still mine from that topic. But yeah, we're focusing on the podcast now. Kind of in the research phase, but I'm praying that one day soon we're going to have something out to show people.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Like I said to you before the podcast started, I saw the stand that you were on Tinfoil Hat, the podcast, and
Mhm.
I saw your whole breakdown of the Satan's little season, and I'd never heard it before, and I was just blown away because I had thought it in the past. I had thought that maybe Revelations had already happened. I don't know how many years, not that long ago, but it just crossed my mind, and I was just like, man, could you imagine that everybody's got it wrong? All these churches are preaching, pre-tribulation and whatnot, and
Mhm.
could you imagine that it already happened? Because we don't really know. We don't know anything. So I thought it was fascinating, man. It really blew my mind.
For sure. Yeah, we got to put our faith in a lot of people that they've told us correctly over the years. And I think at some point I went with that whole, let every word of God be true. If every man was a liar, and you kind of like say, like, could they have lied to me? Now I know, yes, they definitely could have, and I believe they have.
That's awesome, man. All right, well, hey, thank you for coming on, man. It was a pleasure and a blessing, and I thought we talked about a lot of interesting things, a lot of mind blowing things, and I respect your position where you're coming from, and again, I just thank you for coming on the show and pouring your heart out to us and talking about the different subjects that you've created through in the past. Uh, and just before we take off, where can the viewers find you and get a hold of your content?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much go by JT follows JC on almost everything except for Facebook. It's got my full name. Joe Telford is my real name, so if you want to find me on there. But if you go over to my YouTube, it's probably where you find the most content that's relevant to this. On Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, you'll find the reels. But yeah, I have a link tree in pretty much all my profiles, so you'll be able to find me on all the different things, including the audio only podcasts and things like that. So I'm pretty much available wherever you can watch stuff. So
Gotcha.
yeah, so I appreciate the opportunity, guys. Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thank you. And folks, in the description below, you'll see his URL for his link tree there. He's got a full set of different links on there. You can check him out there. But thank you, brother, for coming on. Before we depart from each other here, we like to close it out in a prayer. And so Taylor's going to pray it out for us like he does every show.
All
right. Father God, thank you for everything you've given us. I just thank you that you were able to bring this man on our to just give us some wisdom about what's going on. And I just pray that you continue to guide us and steer us towards you, Father God, and help us to always say what you want us to say and do what you want us to do. And I just pray that you continue to give us wisdom, discernment, and knowledge, and let us not be deceived. And I just plead the blood of Jesus Christ over our viewers and over everybody on this podcast, and JT as well. And I just give you glory, honor, and praise. And in Jesus Christ I pray. Amen.
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 All right, brother. Well, hey, listen, I'm going to stay in contact with you. We'll hopefully get you on too, get you on again in the future. And
Sure thing. Yeah, definitely, guys. Well, all right. It was nice talking to all you guys. God bless.
All right. God bless you, brother. Thanks.
closer, my child.